This silver spoon makes everything taste better.
Your silver spoon's bigger than mine!
Chances are, with your lagna lord in the second house, you may have been born into prosperity or wealth.
So today we're continuing with our Lagna Lord series, and we are going to be covering some of our observations for people that have their Lagna Lord in the second house of their astrological birth chart. And make sure you watch all the way to the end of this video to see our tips on how to take the most advantage of this placement.
This video will apply to you if you have the lord of your ascendant sign placed in the second house of your astrological birth chart from the ascendant. Or it will also apply to you if you have the lord of your moon sign placed in the second house from the moon.
Just to review, in Vedic astrology, the Lagna Lord or Ascendant Lord is a pivotal planet that represents the self, your vitality, and your overall life path.
When the Lagna Lord is placed in the second house, it influences the native's life through themes associated with the second house. Those include accumulated wealth, so in classical Sanskrit texts, the second house is often referred to as Dhana Bhava. So Bhava is house, and Dana means wealth, so it's the house of wealth, specifically wealth that you accumulate, because the 11th house is actually the house of your income or gains, and the 4th house from the 11th house, which means the home of your income, is the second house, so it's like your bank account. So the second house also refers to any kind of learning through oral traditions, so learning through verbal communication from someone that you commit to memory, because the second house also signifies your face in general, and especially the mouth. So anything that goes into the mouth or comes out of the mouth is related to the second house. So we also have food and drink being signified by the second house, as well as your speech. The second house can also be related to your values, as well as the family which you were born into, or your family relations in general. If you're older and the family that you were born into is no longer around, well, whoever the people are that are close to you or near you on a regular basis is going to be mostly related to the second house.
So with any placement, of course, it will depend on your specific astrological placements in your birth chart, but there are some general positive and negatives that go along with the Lagna Lord placed in the second house. And let's start with some of the positives. So of course, one positive is financial prosperity and accumulated wealth. And if the Lagna Lord is in your second house, that will strengthen your house of wealth, the second house, which would often bless the native with good prospects for the accumulation of wealth. So of course that can be, money or resources or material objects, whatever you consider wealth. You're typically blessed with kind of gathering and accumulating that.
This person can also have eloquent speech and communication skills. So the second house governs speech, as we mentioned, and the Lagna Lord here often endows this person with articulate, persuasive, or charming communicative abilities. They may excel in professions requiring oratory skills, such as teaching, public speaking, or diplomacy. If benefics aspect or conjoin the Lagna Lord, the native's words are likely to be truthful, influential, and well received. Some astrologers have also observed that when Jupiter specifically is either in the second house or aspecting the second house, it can give the person what's called Vak Siddhi. Vak means speech and Siddhi means perfection. And this is kind of almost like a mini superpower where whatever you say ends up becoming true. So if you have a lot of benefic influence on the second house, or your lagna lord is Jupiter in the second house or something like that, or you have Jupiter aspecting the second house, you can have this ability where either you always say the truth, or even if something that you say is not the truth in the immediate term, it will end up becoming true.
With the lagna lord placed in the second house, you probably have strong family values and strong family support. And that's because the second house represents family. And the lagna lord being there would indicate that you have a strong connection to your family and any of your family traditions and values. And you as the native may enjoy a supportive family environment, or you can get a lot of emotional security from close familial ties.
So the lagna lord in the second house can also make a person value honesty and integrity, especially in matters related to wealth and speech. Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra mentions that this person will be endowed with good qualities and honorable. So that definitely makes sense that this person would like to only tell the truth or not doing anything unethical related to their speech or their wealth.
So you also have success with the acquisition of knowledge, and that's because the second house is often linked to acquiring knowledge, which is passed through, of course, verbal communication because of the mouth and the speech. And the lagna lord here suggests an ability to acquire knowledge that will aid in your financial or professional success.
So what are some of the negatives that can be a result of this placement? One of them is that this person may become overly focused on accumulating wealth. As we always say when we're doing these lagna lord videos, wherever the lagna lord is placed, whatever the nature and significations of that house are going to kind of color this person's experience of their entire life to some degree or another. So your entire life to some degree or another could be related to the accumulation of wealth. Sometimes this can be at the expense of other areas of life. Additionally, as we said, this person may have been born into a prosperous family situation where all of your needs were being met, because the second house is also related to, you can look at it in a different way as your sustenance, because it's what goes into your mouth. So everything that you need is coming through the second house, and if your second house is strong with the lagna lord placed there, you would be born into a situation where everything that you need is being met. So a downside to this is that it can further increase a person's need to identify as successful or wealthy. So if you came from a situation that was successful or prosperous in general, or even literally financially wealthy, then later on in life you'll want to perpetuate that. But depending on all of the other placements in your chart, you may or may not be able to perpetuate that. And if you're not able to continue to identify as successful or wealthy, that might be psychologically difficult.
And I think Blake Lively has her lagna lord in the second house, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I think so. And if you watched our little series on, Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds and Justin Baldoni, we a little bit go into that in her chart, because she seems to have come from a background that was quite advantageous for her becoming an actress and all that. But it is well documented from people she's worked with that I think she's rather difficult to work with and quite bratty.
Yeah, and we don't know her upbringing, but brattiness could come as a result of being spoiled.
Right.
Yeah, that would be the negatives of lagna lord in the second house, is you could accidentally be spoiled. So if the lagna lord is afflicted or aspected by malefics in this situation, the pursuit of wealth could lead to greed or unethical practices, including lying. So as we said, benefic influence, especially Jupiter influencing the second house, it's going to create truthful speech, or speech which, even if it's not true in the moment, becomes true. That's how powerful that this can be. But the opposite is the case with a lot of negative influence. It will negatively impact that family relationship and dynamic, and it will also negatively impact your speech, and it can encourage behavior like lying, especially lying to get more money to accumulate, because that's the second house.
Which, of course, is reminding me more of Blake Lively's chart, and it is. There's a lot of negative influence on that second house and lagna lord. So another negative potential with this placement is there could be some speech-related challenges. And if the lagna lord is weak in the second house, the native speech may become harsh, critical, often misunderstood. And that, of course, can lead to conflicts or reputational issues. The person may have difficulty keeping their promises or staying true to your word. So the opposite of the benefic influence that would be on the second house. And they may struggle with expressing themselves clearly, and that would make them face a lot of criticism for things that they say. And, that could either be intentional or unintentional, but the result will be the same. It'll come with a lot of criticism because you're misunderstood, or you're not really saying what you want to say very clearly.
Also, financial instability or dependence can take place. If the lagna lord is afflicted or in an inimical sign, the native may face fluctuations in wealth or difficulty managing finances. In some cases, they may rely on family or others for financial support, which could create dependency or tension. So remember, the second house doesn't just represent money, but sustenance in general. So classical texts sometimes mention that a malefic influence on the second house can make a person always, quote, eating at other people's tables or eating other people's food. And what that means from the classical perspective is that they're always dependent on someone else to provide whatever it is that they need to survive.
So with your lagna lord placed in the second house, there might be some extra family responsibilities or even conflicts. And of course, this is with some negative afflictions. A strong connection to family can actually become a burden if the lagna lord is poorly placed. So perhaps it's weak or debilitated, or there's a lot of malefic influence there. Conflicts over family wealth or inheritance are possible if the lagna lord is placed here and it is afflicted. And like I was saying, I know many stories, this has happened in my own life, and it's crazy when you talk to anybody how common this is, where you think you've got a good family or a respectful family, but then somebody dies and there's all of a sudden a lot of something, money or objects or things to be inherited, and then it's like, what happened to everybody getting along? It's like everyone's at each other's throats wanting to get that money or inheritance or whatever it is. And so those conflicts can become possible. So just be aware.
Especially if there's a lot of malefic impact on the second house.
And it's quite tragic. I've seen a lot of families torn up about things like that.
Yeah. So when are you most likely to experience these effects that we've been talking about? Because it's your lagna lord placement, to some degree for your entire life you will have these particular effects. But there are going to be times where these effects that we've talked about are more pronounced than any other time in your life. And those times are when you run through the Mahadasha, or the major planetary period, or the Antardasha, the subplanetary period of this particular planet. So let's say your lagna lord is Jupiter, and it's debilitated in the second house in Capricorn for a Sagittarius ascendant. You're going to, when you go through the Mahadasha of Jupiter or any subperiod of Jupiter, like let's say you're in Rahu Mahadasha, but then you go through Rahu Jupiter, so it's the subperiod of Jupiter. During that time, you're going to experience the effects that we talked about in this video more than any other time in your life.
And the sign placement of your second house is very important as well, especially, well, for any planet, but especially for your lagna lord, because if it's sitting in a friendly or exalted sign, it's going to give a different result than if it's in a enemy or a debilitation sign. It will shape its expression. So, for example, if you are a Capricorn ascendant, that would mean your lagna lord is Saturn, and Saturn is placed in the second house, that would be a good placement because the second house would be Aquarius, which is Saturn's Multricone sign, and it loves to be in Aquarius. So that's an example of a great placement of lagna lord in the 12th house. However, on the flip side, if you're a Sagittarius ascendant, and that would mean your second house is Capricorn, and Jupiter is your lagna lord because Jupiter rules Sagittarius, and Jupiter is placed in the second house in Capricorn, that is a debilitation sign for Jupiter. So that would be an example of where it is your lagna lord is afflicted or in a weakened state.
So our first tip to maximize the positives of this placement is to use your voice with your lagna lord in the second house of speech. How you use your voice will have an influence on your overall path through life. So practice clear, kind, and honest communication and try to make sure that your word is your bond. This will help you accumulate wealth. So again, everything related to the second house is going to take a prime importance in your life and your life path. So the second house can mean it's your word, your ability to fulfill or not fulfill your promises. And if you really make a conscious effort, no matter what the planetary positions are, if you make a really seriously conscious effort to make sure that you either do everything that you say you're going to do, or you don't say that you're going to do something if you're not sure that you can do it. This will help you a lot in your life path, because when you have your word as your bond and you're able to fulfill it, it will increase your reputation a lot. And with this placement, it will increase your ability to accumulate wealth. However, if you're always not doing what you say that you're going to do, this will definitely weaken this position. So another tip that we have for someone with lagna lord in the second house is focus on your career. The 10th house of your birth chart is the 9th from the second, which means that the luck in relation to your second house, matters like accumulation of wealth, will be bolstered by tending to things related to the 10th house. Malefics in the second house can also indicate resting bitch face. So you definitely want to be... It's true.
I'm trying to do it. I know. If you've heard of that, it's another thing I feel like we've all had to have seen this person where they just look like they're a really mean person.
They look intimidating or standoffish.
Yeah, and it's maybe they're actually not, but they just have this face where they look mad or pissed or mean all the time. Resting bitch face.
Yeah, so if you have malefics in the second house, or your lagna lord is a malefic place in the second house, it can be something to be aware of, like, oh, I might have sometimes resting bitch face.
Yeah.
But the opposite is the case when it's benefics, like especially Venus. A person has kind of like a very sweet face, or very like, oh, have like a very charming, attractive face that's not so mean looking.
Nasty. All right, we better stop before we get too crazy. We hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to leave us a like and a comment, and visit us at atmaoccult.com to learn more about your individual birth chart and watch all of our videos.